Jeff, direct admissions is something that I first became aware of a few years back when, frankly, got pitched by a company that was starting to pioneer it, and they wanted me to interview them on the podcast. And then it started to get a lot of ink in the trade press around higher ed. But admissions is your bailiwick, as people listening to this podcast know. So before we get too far into this episode, lay out the landscape for us. What is direct admissions?
Yeah, so direct admissions essentially flips the traditional script of applying to college, right? So instead of requiring students to submit an application and wait for a response, colleges proactively admit students, right? That based on existing data, such as academic records or test scores or GPA, anything that they have on students. So in essence, high schools or school districts or application platforms, for example, like the Common App, they opt into sharing the students' profiles with colleges that have also adopted direct admissions, right? So they're kind of the middle people between those two things. The college will then review the information and make proactive offers to students that meet their criteria, right? So they'll send them a note saying, hey, you're accepted. And the student thinks, well, I didn't even apply there and I got accepted, right? The theory behind this is that it really eliminates the friction of applying to college. And that's really the general idea of this, right? Of trying to eliminate the barrier of the application itself. This idea has been really tried in various ways over the years, Michael. I mentioned up top the FAST app. And that was an app that colleges would send to students or to would-be students. And the basic information was already filled out for them. So all they had to do was kind of complete the application. There was, and there still is, these visit days where you could go tour college. And by the end of your visit, you'll know if you're accepted or not. So you could kind of apply on the spot and know if you're accepted within an hour of visiting the college. I think the difference here with this movement of direct admissions is really one of scale. I first wrote about this for The Atlantic in 2022. And in my reporting, I interviewed Jennifer Delaney, who's a professor at the University of Illinois, who has really studied this concept and its impact. And as she told me, we're asking students to fill out a form for every school they want to go to. And they have to know how to initiate that. And now some students are really good at that, and some families are great at that, and some counselors have the time to show you how to do that, but that's not true for most students. The idea of direct admissions really takes a page from automatic enrollment and retirement plans, or those pre-approved credit card offers that you get in the mail. The process was pioneered in the states at first, both Idaho and South Dakota. In Idaho, for example, K through 12 education and higher ed are both overseen by the same state board of education. So it makes it much easier to transfer student data, for example, between the two. Michael, I think there's a theme here, right? Like so many other things we talk about on this podcast. In higher ed, it really starts with that student data record between K through 12 and higher ed. And when you're able to share that, much easier to send that off to people. Idaho's direct admissions program, they use students' GPAs, they use high school course credits, ACT or SAT scores to admit them to state institutions. Students are notified by a letter, and then they could claim their seat at a particular campus by completing a short form. And when Idaho put direct admissions into place for its 8 public colleges and universities back in 2015, so 10 years ago, they saw a 6.7% increase in the number of high school graduates immediately enrolling in college. So it seemed to work in that way. Since then, of course, the Common App, private companies, including Niche and EAB and others in the admission space have entered this game. So that gives you a little bit of the backstory on direct admissions.
Well, and as you said, Jeff, there are a number of companies now essentially facilitating direct admissions, sharing student data with schools that sign up on their platform, and then helping manage the process of schools choosing which students to admit. And today we get to welcome one of those companies and its CEO and founder, Luke Skirman of niche.com. Luke, welcome to Future You.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Really excited to be here.